What's going on, Tribe? Very good morning from Singapore. Welcome back to another episode of the Tribe Talk series with a very special guest this time. Please welcome world number three from the 21-22 season, Brett Taylor. Mate, heartiest congratulations on a stellar, phenomenal season. Obviously, now you have been on the Fantasy Football Scout as well, so people are getting to know you personally and what your thinking was during the game. Has it really sunk in yet?
Yeah, oh, look, it feels great. I feel very privileged given, I know how much effort people put into playing this game. And not only that, but people, like yourself, building this great community around it and all of the content. And it's all about going for number one. So to be in one of those close, top positions, I feel very lucky and very privileged. And yeah, just have been enjoying having discussions like these with a few more people about how it all went. But yeah, I think it was good that until KDB scored those 4 goals, I wasn't quite right up to the top. So the stress wasn't too bad for too long. It was all at once right at the end there.
That week was surreal. Him scoring 4 goals, which was not more of a surprise, but scoring all 4 goals with his left foot. It was just and all four amazing finishes. Your FPL team name is I Love Lamptey. Uh, I don't think you're a Brighton fan. What's all that about?
Yeah, the year before it was Great Foden's Raven, which was another Anchorman kind of pun. And so
Right.
then I thought of I Love Lamp that Brick says and turned it into
Right.
another FPL reference. So it was a little bit of a sequel, but yeah, I like silly jokes like that.
So let's get into your FPL history, and let's just see what has happened since now. You kind of took up to FPL quite early. I think you finished your 16th season. So how are things evolved for you, and how's game changed?
Yeah, it's only because I think I finished third that other people have started to look at this, and even for me, I haven't really spent any time looking back until now, and it's quite interesting. I think I obviously started playing the game because I love football and also love all of the games around it, like Football Manager and things like that. And I've always been interested in the statistical and analytical side of things, which ended up sort of being a part of my career. But looking back to those early seasons, I think we had barely any access to watch games
Right.
here in Australia, and definitely didn't have anything like the information we have now about the players and statistics and things like that. So I'm sure I would have just been starting a team, putting a few Australian players in there, and then I can't even remember honestly whether I played through the whole season or just sort of was one of those people that let it go after a few weeks. So I think only more recently have I had time to invest in the game a bit more. So yeah, you've highlighted
Right.
those last 4 seasons before this one now,
Yeah.
where I started to do a bit better. So after 2016 was actually the time when I left my job as a performance analyst for the A-League club Melbourne City here. So I can see that that's when suddenly I had a bit more time in my life to invest into things like this. But I also think that's been the time when I started to um, watch the Scoutcast and find the price change
Right.
websites and look at stats, spend a bit more time digging around stats myself. And then in this most recent season, I signed up for FPL Review and started looking at, what the models have to say. And
So yeah. So we'll touch base upon your last 4 seasons, wherein you know you had a quite a volatile rank. You had two back-to-back great seasons, and obviously you finished in 6-digit ranks in the last 2 seasons, and now here you are finishing number three. Just to pick your brain on it, has the way you have played changed in the last 5 seasons, including the 21-22 season, or you've always had the same kind of a thought process going into any?
it definitely has changed. I would look at those most recent 2 years, which weren't particularly good, and I still think that there was a case of maybe if I missed a few weeks or fell behind a bit, then started doing some kind of
Right.
silly picks and if it wasn't going well, just kind of dropped off and focused more on my Fantrax draft league game with my mates, which I also
Right.
play and things like that. So I wish I'd really put full effort into all of these, because then maybe I could really zero in on what was different in the ones where I did better compared to not as well. But in saying that, I do think that my game has changed, and yeah, that's something that has been a mistake that I've made many times in the past, of being too stubborn. If a player starts doing well and for some reason I didn't jump on
Yeah,
early
yeah,
enough, I'll kind of say, "Oh, I'm not getting them. I'll keep betting against them," and try to be too
right,
smart and go down some other path. And then that player just punishes me all season. And I should have just gone with the crowd and tried to find my differences somewhere else. So that's definitely something that I've tried to get out of my game. And then the other thing I would say is going back to that point around using the tools, is that even those 2 seasons where I did quite well there was a lot of invested time myself sitting there looking through the stats and really breaking things down in different ways over different amounts of, how many games do you want to go back, or home and away, or whatever it might be. But now with something like FPL review, and I know there's other models out there as well, so that's just one I've been using,
right,
but I'm not saying it's necessarily the only one or the best one. It's doing a lot of that work for you, so I think you can save a lot
right.
more time actually crunching the numbers yourself, if unless you want to, and you can
Yeah.
spend that time, watching more games or whatever. So yeah, having that shortcut, I think, is something that helped me not fall into that trap of losing interest, or running out of time to invest in the game this year. So that's definitely something that's been handy.
No, absolutely. I myself, I'm, uh, much more. I love to deep dive more into the stat side, though as I think Singapore at times, the matches which are telecasted at times cannot be really favorable, because the first match starts around 8:30 p.m. And the last match goes on. The prime matches, which are on the last match, starts around 2:30 in the morning. So I do end up watching 2 or 3 games on Saturday, and one game on Sunday. So I do really rely, you know, my style of play is definitely going through the stats, and I do write threads as well on more of the stats rather than more of a eye test. Uh, so as you said, your thought process has changed in the last 4 to 5 seasons. Uh, so has the tilt moved towards eye test to stats driven thinking, or was it always been like that?
I think it's always been a bit of both for me, and I'd say it still is. So in my Twitter bio, I actually have FPL data and eye test, but eye test is crossed out, and I put context there,
Right.
because that's how I kind of treat this argument. It's not necessarily
Right.
one or the other where they're in competition. It's
Yeah.
that something might be coming up in the data, and the data doesn't lie, but with your eye, I think the edge that you can get, if you're able to watch enough games and you know what you're looking for, is to understand, okay, why is that player producing that data, and is that something that is repeatable? So I think we're going to
Yeah.
talk a bit about some players later on, but for example, Conor Gallagher is someone who was doing well earlier this season, and even the data was kind of backing him up. It wasn't as though it was just like a fluky scoring run where you can normally ignore if someone's just having a hot streak and outperforming their XG
Yeah.
by a mile. You can ignore those players, but his data was actually there too. But watching their games and seeing his chances, I could see that there was a couple of chances where he was literally, a meter out from goal and
Mm.
hitting the ball, and maybe it got deflected. So then he took another shot, and he's just getting so
Right.
much XG from that moment. Where if that hadn't happened, then he would have been, much more back in the pack, data wise. And he was in that position and was having those shots, and that's what you want. So I'm not saying that you can just
Right.
completely disregard it, but it's just giving that
Yeah.
little bit of context through the eye test of where is this data coming from, and do I think it will be repeatable, or is it something that's just going to kind of wash out as the sample size increases?
Absolutely. So you mentioned Gallagher, and I don't think you owned Gallagher even once this season.
No.
Was it the thinking behind that was because I also didn't. I think I held on to him for like a couple of weeks, when I had already missed the bus. So was your thinking about that? Yes, it's Gallagher. Yes, he's here. He's here on a loan on this season. Yes, there's a new manager under Patrick Vieira, and he wants to prove a point to his owners in the first season, though they finished really well. Was it still that Crystal Palace is still uh, a middle table team, and they would not keep scoring goals like average goals scored will be again between 1.3 for them. So that's why this has to stop sometime.
Yeah, I think I think that's right. I don't think he was a bad pick. I think, depending on
Right.
someone's team context and your team structure, I don't think he was a really bad pick. Whereas someone like Bernardo Silva, I do think that was probably a bit of a trap that maybe some people fell into, because he was scoring the points, but in a way that was a little bit more, of just a hot streak, outperforming data that was not likely to continue. Where I don't think Gallagher was a bad pick, but as you said, yeah, Crystal Palace, I don't think they're going to score a mountain of goals this season.
Right.
Looking at their team, they have a front three and then him coming from deeper in midfield. So he's not their most advanced player or that close to goal.
Right.
So I think across the season, he's not really going to be that talismanic scorer that a Rafinha would be at Leeds, who's another mid-table
Yeah.
team. But he's so central to everything that they're doing that
Right.
he could still be a better pick than a Gallagher. So those were the reasons I think that I was happy to ignore him and look at other options and focus on, the high priority moves became players like Jota as soon as Firmino was injured,
Right. Right.
and Jota was likely to play a lot of minutes. That Liverpool are going to score more than twice as many goals as Crystal Palace
Yeah.
this season, and if he's in that front three, he's just guaranteed points pretty much. So those are the type of picks that I'm looking for.
It's good you mentioned the name Jota, because uh, you had him. You had him in your team since game week 1, and the reason why we are stressing on Jota is because the ability to pick up the goal scoring assets has really, I think, been a reason for you doing well. And now this chart really depicts, again, this has been taken from FPL Optimized. It's basically to tell the community that this is the difference between a top 100 rank and a top 100,000 rank, and that's where the data is. So if you go to the second column, where the number of goals that have been scored by the players that you picked, especially the midfielders and forward, it's been the success ratio has been 37%, as compared to mine, which is 28%. Now you had Jota from game week 1, and you had it in your team for the first half of the season. You picked Jared Bowen for exactly 8 to 9 game weeks from, I think, 15 to 24, 25, where he did generate 6 to 7 double-digit hauls. And you picked Son from the first game week as well. So just explain what is the thought process behind picking up a goal scoring asset for you?
Yeah, for sure. And firstly, I think this is great, great data. So I think you've set up this analysis well, and well done on your rank this season, because FPL Reviews season review tool was telling me that based on the season I played and its data, which is what FPL Optimize uses as well, I only had a less than 50% chance, I think, of making the top 50k this season based on the way
Right.
I played and others played. So 82,000 is right up there, and a lot of the variance between going higher than that, it comes down to a bit of luck. So well done. And yeah, okay. So to your question, I think it's been really interesting to see this data that I did pick a lot of goal scorers, because my team structure this season, I went with only 1 or 2 strikers for most of the season. So a lot of this was coming from midfield as well. But I think that kind of leads us to the answer, because looking at the type of players I picked and the ones that you mentioned there, Son, Jota, Bowen, looking at the way teams set up tactically these days, often you'll have the number 9, the striker, kind of dropping deeper, like Harry Kane, Firmino, these types of players, and it'll be that wide player like Salah. He's essentially a winger, but he's playing probably closest to goal in that team. And it was the same for Bowen. You had Antonio kind of drawing the defenders away, and Bowen really making those diagonal runs in behind from the right, and Son doing that from the other side for Spurs. So I think you can find a lot of players who are listed as midfielders in FPL, where again, if you use a little bit of an eye test and have some familiarity with how the teams are shaping up, you can see that it's that sort of, in the modern game, that wide player is often the one who's going to be in front of goal to finish off the chance. So that's definitely something that comes to mind when I wonder how I pick so many goal scorers, is looking for those types of players, perhaps more so than a Gallagher or a Bernardo Silva who's coming from that second line from a little bit deeper. So that's one thing I would focus on with the type of players I'd pick. And then the other point I think we touched on as well, which is looking at the fixtures. So look at the strength of the team, of the player who you're picking. Are they going to keep racking up goals? And look at the teams that they're playing against. The Premier League's becoming a bit like La Liga 10 years ago, where you have these superpower teams and a massive gap in quality down to the teams at the bottom. And I really picked on Norwich and Watford a lot this season, I'm sorry to say, to them, and just constantly targeted them with captaincy. I picked a lot of players for the long term, but around the edges of my squad, I took a couple of short-term punts. Even Marcel, I started with at the start of the season, even though Wolves had 3 bad fixtures to start with, just thinking I'll just bench him. And then from game week 4 onwards, they had a nice run, and he got a 13-pointer for me in the first game I played him in game week 4. And by the end of the season, that was maybe the difference between a top 10 spot or not. So, be a flat track bully and target those weaker teams, and particularly when the weaker teams have players out from injury or suspension or something like that. The players who are coming in are just not Premier League quality, and that's when you can really find some joy. So those two things in combination is my best guess as to how I achieved that, other than blind luck.
Also, I think the other aspect, if I compare these two tables, is obviously the goal scores here are only from midfielders and forwards. Obviously, the defenders aren't included in this. But if you see the number of picks that you made, which are 271 as compared to mine, which is 261, obviously you are giving yourself more chances to score a goal rather than me, just using 261. Obviously, that also has to have an effect in your decision making as well. That you need to go. Yes, people do talk about going big at the back, 5 at the back, with playing 5-3-2 or 5-4-1. Do you have any kind of a formation in mind, or obviously it needs to be flexible? But was it always 5 in the middle for you?
Yeah, I think I've been looking at a 5 midfielder structure for a few seasons now, because I think, as I said, with the midfielders, a lot of them, they're pretty much playing as a striker anyway, but you're getting that extra point for a goal when they score one, and an extra point for a clean sheet if their team keeps one. So if you're picking the players from the better teams as well, like City and Liverpool, they're just getting so many extra points than other options. So for most of the season, I ran dead with at least one of my striker positions. By the end of the season, I had 2 4.5 million strikers, along with Kane, and just hope that he'd be able to, not get injured or something like that. So I really focused on saving money in that position, and I think you can probably get more bang for your buck elsewhere. But looking at this data as well, and I think that's another really interesting comparison to look at the picks, because at first I was confused at how I also had more picks in for the clean sheet, and I think because this season had so many double game weeks, looking at the bonus there, I actually got an extra 16 players than you did across the season, and that's probably the result of really focusing on those double game weeks and using my chips to ensure that I didn't have players blanking and had as many doublers as possible, which is another thing, using FPL review, looking at the points projections when there's a double game week, you see that these very average players are suddenly much higher than the typical City and Liverpool guys. So those are very powerful, and that was another big focus.
Just a minute on double game weeks. So is it? So there was a prime example in, I think, game week 36 or 37, when Wadi was back fit. right? And he was playing Watford. Leicester was playing Watford and Chelsea, and they were both away games. Uh, there were a few in the community who went on and got Wadi back, especially I think after when Leicester was out of the Conference League. They got Wadi back just for that Watford game, and uh, obviously Chelsea they were not really expected. They were not expecting to get any return from Wadi from the Chelsea game. So in your first of all, were you one of those? And secondly, how do you really approach a double game week like this? And as you had mentioned earlier, you always had been targeting Norwich, Watford. So what was it for you approaching a double game week?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to be on my second free hit that week. So I did triple up on Leicester, and yeah, it was quite interesting because I think the Leicester that we've known over the past few years has been up around fourth or fifth position. They've been unlucky to miss out on the Champions League. So in my mind, that's their level with the team that they have. And then this season, they had a lot of injuries at centre back, and then they were stretched a bit thin playing in Europe as well. And so for the big middle part of the season in the league, they were pretty much a non-event. They weren't on our radars at all for FPL. There was too much rotation and too many injuries there. But pretty much when the time they got knocked out of Europe, they had a lot of players coming back. I think reading some manager quotes and things like that, you got the feeling that they really wanted to finish the season strongly and show to themselves, we're a lot better than a mid-table team again. And so I tried to quickly update that story in my head about where are Leicester at, and if their underlying level is top 4, top 5 team, they had a slightly trickier double game week than I think Everton and Aston Villa were the other two. I still got players from those teams because they had great fixtures as well, but I really thought if we had a Chelsea or an Arsenal or a Spurs who had a double game week here, we'd be jumping on them for sure. And Leicester, I think, once they do play their full strength team, are at that level. And so I went for Vardy, Maddison, and Castagna as well, who that one didn't come off so much. But playing against Watford in the first game, where Watford had about 9 or 10 players out, that to me, that just
and I think they were already relegated.
Yeah, they'd pretty much already down, nothing to play for. It's not a club that's in particularly good shape with all the uncertainty at manager and things like that. I just got the feeling like this is one of those games where there's an opportunity for big gains, with not too many people looking at Leicester maybe in that light that I described. Were you on free hit at that time, or
this was 36, right? 37.
37, I think. Yeah.
So the reason I have not had too much of success in my FPL history has been that if I decide something 4-5 weeks back about a decision that I have to take a month later, I just get fixated with this. So in 33, 32, when I was doing content about game, we double the wild cards and free hits and everything. So I looked at 38 as a free hit game week, and I just stuck on to it. I did not make myself flexible enough, though I think it could have ended up better if I did not try to be smart and I made Mount the captain instead of making Son the captain on the last game week. If I had made Son the captain, it would have been a 90 plus kind of a game week. But as you have been rightly pointing out, that how flexible you need to be, during the whole season. So
it's really interesting about hearing you talk about planning ahead and then getting fixated on a plan, because I think one of the lessons that I've taken on board over the past few years is that importance of planning ahead. Because any Meet the Manager video you watch with the successful managers will talk about that. But the way I've kind of learned to approach it is, when you bring in a player, plan ahead in that, make sure that they're a good pick for the long term. So they have good fixtures, they're going to stay in the team and things like that. But don't necessarily plan your moves, what you're going to do 5 or 6 weeks in advance, or sometimes you might get stuck. So I think week to week you need to be adaptable, but with the decisions
Absolutely.
you do make, don't look too short term with those. So that's an interesting kind of interpretation of that
No, it's
advice
a
that I've been grappling with.
all right. So let's now get into, there are a couple of certain decisions that you made, which I was looking at your season very closely, and there were a few assets where the community was divided. And I've taken just three or four examples where we're going to compare two players from one particular team. So you had Luka Dean for 6 games, and you just had cash for 1 game. So what was your thinking behind this? And I think I was just checking the number of points per game points that they gave you. Not both of them were not really successful in terms of giving an average of more than 5 points. So first of all, what was the decision behind going to Luka Dean rather than Matty Cash?
Yeah, so I think I had them both for 1 game at the end on that free hit. So it was really around game week 28 when I had to choose between one or the other to have in my team for a little while. And I think Dean may have been very slightly cheaper at that time because basically I think they're both really good options, similar. So I don't think there's a lot between them, and maybe just the fact that Dean has set pieces was just that extra avenue to goal. But in saying that, Cash is probably a bit more of a threat to actually score a goal rather than get the assists that Dean is, and defenders get a lot more points for that. So I think there's pretty much not much between them, and it wasn't a strong feeling one way or the other. It was just just maybe that price at the time, and it probably didn't work out as well. But
was it also to do with how Aston Villa started playing under Steven Gerrard?
Yeah, definitely. So whenever a new manager takes over a team that might be interesting from an FPL perspective, I like to do a bit of research about how they have been set up at previous clubs, particularly if it's been overseas. So yeah, I've talked a bit about Spurs and Conte taking over and the impact that would have on Son and why, and then he played a big part in my season. But it was similar with Villa, where I looked at what Gerrard had been doing in Scotland, and his attack is very focused around getting both fullbacks forward. So as soon as he took over, I had at least one eye on both these players to see if they would emerge as options from that price bracket. They were probably people I was looking at closer than others from that point. And then in terms of picking one over the other, I think they were both perfectly good.
Hey, I got something to say. I'm just so sick of hearing everyone complain. I know it's tough and I know there's pain, but hitting bottom is the only way to change.